security is a game of getting punched in the face. So the question is not, what was your plan up until you got punched in the face? The question is, what's your plan now that you've been punched in the face?
But Coinbase has not been hypothetically punched in the face. So are you constantly
I would argue we are constantly punched in the face. The problem, what we've never been is we've never lost a fight.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because that's that punch is the beginning, not the end. You can't help but get punched in the face in crypto.
Hey everyone, welcome to Talking Tokens, a podcast focused on interviewing the best crypto founders, market players, and up-and-coming startups that are changing the industry every single Tuesday and Thursday. I'm Jacquelyn Melinek, your award-nominated host and former senior crypto reporter turned entrepreneur, and I'm excited to be here with you all. Now, let's get into it.
Today's guest is Coinbase's Chief Security Officer, Philip Martin. Philip is responsible for keeping one of the world's largest crypto exchanges and the US's largest crypto exchange secure, which I am sure is no small feat, especially because it's never been hacked. I'm excited to talk to Philip about all things security, Coinbase, and just the whole state of hacks in general, which crypto's got a lot of them. So Philip, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
To start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up at Coinbase?
Sure. So I've been at Coinbase for a little over 8 years now. Started back in 2016 when Coinbase was under 100 people, was only listing Bitcoin, really only had one sort of product line. I think we had just launched the exchange at that point. And really what brought me to Coinbase originally was the ability to work on security in a field where it was truly existential to the platform, right? A significant security incident at Coinbase carries with it the risk of just enormous reputational damage, loss of trust that could easily be fatal to a platform like Coinbase and has been fatal to a lot of other platforms in crypto, as we've seen over the years. And combine that with the fascinating problem set, right? The ability to work on security in a place where it hasn't really been at the time hadn't really been defined yet, is a fascinating challenge, right? Like from most fields, I'm of the opinion that people should steal ideas, right? Because people have mostly thought of things before. They've tried to consider them.
It's a free market.
They've taken approaches, right? you go with what the market figured out is the best, most efficient approach. In cryptocurrency back in 2016, we were really experimenting from whole cloth. And the field has continued to grow and develop at a pace that means we're still doing that today for brand new things, right? Like what is the right way with the time we listed Ethereum, right? How do we think about smart contract security? How do we think about protecting tokens where the code is immutable, which is great, but the code's also immutable, which is not always great. How do we think about protecting multiple networks? How do we think about running our own L2? How do we think about rollups? How do we think about all sorts of really amazing innovations that have security implications that we get to then, take some of the first cracks at solving? It's just fascinating.
That's interesting. I thought, and maybe this is as someone looking from the outside in, that security would mean like for the exchange as a whole, which I'm sure it does, but it also means for each of the cryptocurrencies that you offer.
So we take a look as part of our listing process. We take a look at all the currencies that we offer from a security perspective. What we're assessing is what we call custodiability, which is really if you give us one of whatever that currency is, do we believe that we can give you one of them back when you ask for it, right? Do we believe there are inherent faults in the protocol or platform that would mean that no matter what we do, we'll be unable to protect that asset, or do we believe there to be, coding errors, things like that would make us concerned for the future health of the platform? So it's not obviously an endorsement of the security of each of the currencies, but we take a long, hard look at everything that we list.
So knock on wood, Coinbase has not been hacked in its 10, 12 years of existence?
12 years is what we are today.
And you've been there for 8. So what are you guys doing to prevent them? It sounds so silly, but I mean, we've seen exchanges be hacked before, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But it's not uncommon for hacks to happen in the space, and Coinbase is so massive. So how are you guys really preventing it? Maybe let's start with like back when you first started to now as things become more complex.
Sure. But I mean, the answer is really very similar, which is number one, as a company, as a business, we invest in it. We think we know it matters. And so Coinbase is, let's call it roughly 3,500 people. Today, probably closer to 4,000. My team's somewhere around 300 people.
Wow. That's a lot of people
focused on security, right? And that's not inclusive of all the security work that Coinbase does, right? A bunch of our product teams work on security, and building security features into the products and things like that. So, we know it's job one from the very, very beginning. And that starts from the top with Brian, right? Two is so often, I think, and especially in crypto security, the temptation is to focus on the exotic, right? The really cool L2 security risks, things like that. But if you look at how platforms actually get breached in the industry, it's largely the simple stuff, right? It's phishing, it's application security vulnerabilities, it's, bad private key management, it's things like that actually cause real losses to these platforms. And so we focused from the very beginning and up until today on the basics, on what we would call security hygiene, right? And we don't, not to the detriment of like thinking about the more exotic advanced attacks that could show up, but as sort of as a first order, first principles, are we doing the basics? Are we patching? Do we know where our systems are? Do we know what this code is doing? Do we know everything that's running in production? Is it all up to date? Do we have a plan if there's an incident? How we exercise that plan? Do we look at, like, as we do and have for as long as I've been at Coinbase, are we looking at other security issues that happen to other companies and asking ourselves, could that happen here? And if so, how? And if not, what are the things that we're doing to prevent that? And how can we make that better, stronger, faster, what have you, right? But it's really this focus on continual improvement, on not ignoring the basics, and also on keeping up with the industry as a whole, right? That I think is one of the core things that has led us to have the track record that we have.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people in maybe the crypto space are all about decentralized exchanges and get your money off centralized exchanges, but that's not a narrative that exists in the mainstream eyes. Like they would 1,000,000% go to Coinbase first over like transferring their funds to a random DEX and then transferring it, hoping that the address they put is real. Like all these things that are just maybe crypto native and not just accessible at this point. But how do you kind of look at distrust for centralized exchanges as a whole? Not necessarily Coinbase, but after FTX collapse, we saw a lot of people just not wanting anything to do with centralized exchanges.
Yeah.
And that's a really big problem. And security and trust, I think, go hand in hand. So for you, how do you look at that?
Look, I think it's a rational fear, right? Different people have different concerns and different threat models, and that's fine. This exists in outside of crypto too, right? You can talk to people about, do you want to keep your money in a bank or not?
Or under your mattress.
Or under your mattress, or in a mayonnaise jar in the backyard, or right? Or wherever the place that folks want to do it is. And I get it. I understand, right? There are risks out there that different people are going to be comfortable with in different ways. And so I will never be the person that tells somebody, oh, you should always use a centralized exchange. Sure, I do, but I do it because I think if Coinbase loses, I should lose. Right. So all my crypto is on Coinbase and has been since the beginning, and it will continue to be. But there are people who who want to use a ledger and worry about backups and recoveries and accessibility. And what if the house burns down? And what if I have a house guest that, gets in my desk drawer and takes my ledger? Or,
that's a bad house guest.
Right. That's not a good choice in house guest. Right. But I think different people are comfortable with different threat models, and that's completely fine, which is why we offer a self-custody product, right, in Coinbase Wallet for people that want that.
How do you look at securing users' assets? I know that's like a big question, but what's the first thing that came to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is transparency. So I and my team can and do a lot on the back end to ensure that we don't let attackers steal from Coinbase. the biggest threat out there today, right? If you just take a random person in crypto land and ask, how are you most likely to lose your crypto? Is that you're going to get scammed in some way, shape, or form, and convinced to do something that's not in your best interests. Whether it's, a pig butchering scam, whether it's a token authorization scam in a wallet app or whatever it is, right? And so the important thing when we think about that is about, number one, making sure consumers understand what it is that they're actually doing. What does it mean when you push that button? What's going to happen underneath the hood? Number two, educating them on what scams look like, what can go wrong. And what are the signs and symptoms that you might be involved or the person you're talking to might be involved with a scam? And what can you do to prevent yourself from being scammed?
Does Coinbase have any pop-up blockers or maybe telling you hey, this might be a malicious link. Don't send it there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So both.
How successful are they? Do you know?
It varies.
People
right?
are like, no, I'm still going to do it.
Sure. Some people do.
Yeah.
And that's, we're not 100% and probably never will be in saying that's for sure bad or good or anything else. What the best we can do, I think about this a lot, is Google safe browsing, right? You go to visit a site that maybe is low reputation, whatever. Google says, do you really want to do that? And then you can say, yes, I do. And that's okay, because you're sort of, as a consumer, you have more information and you're making a more informed choice. And so in places like Coinbase Wallet, right? We will have pop-ups when consumers are doing things that we think might be indicative of being involved with a scam. In Coinbase, actually both Wallet and in the Coinbase custodial products, we maintain lists of addresses that are known to be associated with scams or hacks or fraud or things like that. And we'll warn or prevent people from sending things to those addresses. We use a bunch of machine learning in this process. We do a bunch of this stuff to flag to consumers that they might be doing something that's going to get them somewhere that they don't want to go.
Is that a fairly new feature, or it's been around for a while?
No, we've been doing that for a long time. I don't recall the first time we sort of rolled this out, but it's been years, certainly.
How much money do you think you've saved with it? Not you personally. I'm hoping with you all of it, but
yeah, 100%. I certainly millions. I would have to. I don't. It's somewhere between tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, probably would be my guess.
That's astonishing. I mean, before we started recording, I showed you that I was looking at the rec database for how much money has been lost in hacks. In the past year, it was 1.8 billion. And you argue that it would actually be higher, right? Could be. Who's to say?
Could be.
We can't track it all.
Not all the stuff gets reported, right? Which is really unfortunate, I think. But
you think by companies or individuals?
Both. Certainly individuals. Yeah. Right. Because there's a lot, especially for scams, there's unfortunately a lot of shame around that for victims.
Yeah.
That they don't always come forward and report something as having gone wrong. And so it probably is somewhat underreported, would be my guess. And then the other thing is, it's relatively remarkable that we actually can track it with a reasonable fidelity in crypto. Right. I think we're the first. If you would ask that question about cash, I would have no ability to answer it. Right. Yeah. How much is lost to scams in dollars? I don't know.
A lot.
A lot. Right. Yeah. And so the ability that we even have that we can even sort of marginally approach truth in crypto because of the blockchain is actually really cool.
Right. Yeah. What do you think is okay, well, actually, you brought up there's a lot of shame with this and people don't report it. So for those who are listening, let's say you get scammed, hopefully you don't. Where would they report it? Who should they report it to would be your advice?
So there actually are a number of options, believe it or not. So the standard advice would be report it to an organization called IC3, which is sort of a piece of the FBI basically that takes internet crime reports. There's a great organization out of the Bay Area called the React Task Force, run by a local district attorney who is doing a great job in combating online scams and fraud wherever it's found, although they do a lot of work in crypto. In fact, They just, her name is Erin West, and she just did an interview for 60 Minutes in Australia just this last weekend, or rather the interview aired this last weekend, where they did a deep dive into pig butchering. And it's really fascinating because they go into the sort of the human trafficking side of pig butchering and like where these call centers are and the conditions there. And it's a fascinating watch, honestly. But so their resource, just local police, jurisdictions, especially in larger cities, will take these reports as well. Right. And the thing that's important about this stuff is as we get, as law enforcement gets these reports, it helps them to focus their efforts on these crimes. But, like it or hate it, law enforcement, especially investigations like this, are driven by observed loss, right? And so if law enforcement
loss, the more they'll pay attention.
The more the loss, the more they'll pay attention. And so these reports really, really do help to prioritize these bad actors for law enforcement.
I actually saw a Chainalysis report recently that said pig butchering was the largest revenue generating scam, I think, in the past year in crypto. And we've talked about pig butchering. I just want to make sure that our audience knows we're not talking about literal pigs being butchered. Can you explain for them what it means? Because I remember when I first heard the term pig butchering, I was like, that's a ridiculous term for what it actually means.
Yeah. So the term
it derives from, yes.
The term comes from the Chinese term for this type of scam. We would generally refer to it as a confidence scam or a romance scam.
Yes.
Here, it's just a specific type of it where the scam generally takes longer. There is an element of, in many cases, love or romance almost, or catfishing involved in the confidence building phase, and then pivots to some sort of investment scam. The details can be different for each of the different things. We actually did a video on this relatively recently. I don't know if you've seen it, but we worked with two victims to help them tell their stories of their experience with pig butchering, and we did it so that they could remain anonymous. We used voice actors. It's animated, so there's no tried to minimize their exposure, but they really, really wanted to help tell their story, because one of the crazy stats that we see, it's in this video, is when a potential pig butchering victim hears from a previous victim, they're something like 98% less likely to be scammed. It's this enormously stark difference that it makes. And so we really want folks to engage with that content. And I'd actually be even willing to say most of the people listening to your podcast are probably aware of pig butchering, have probably heard about it, are probably in some way or form, know something about it. But I'd also be willing to bet that every single one of them, every single person listening can think of one person in their lives who they might think of as financially vulnerable or at risk. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's an aunt or an uncle, it's a loved one somewhere. And so what I always ask people on sort of, when I talk about this in crypto forums is like, this content isn't for you, but find someone who it is for and send it to them so that they can watch it and they can be a little bit more educated and hopefully a little bit more resistant to these scams.
Do you think it is a generational thing?
I think a lot of it is. But more than that, I think it is. I think it's a generational thing, yes, but I don't think it's actually solved yet. Right. I think about this in terms of, when we were growing up, I bet around your kitchen table or wherever the venue was, you learned a lot about physical world safety, right? Stranger danger. Of course, absolutely. Yeah. Right. The white blacked out windowed vans are not somewhere.
It was a real thing. I don't know if they're still. Yeah. I mean, that's silly for me to say. Yes, kids are still being kidnapped and I hope they stop. But I'm saying like it was such a prominent thing back when I was a kid, and now it's like not a conversation. But yeah, online scams now are very much so. But
so like we learned all these physical world safety habits, right? Stop your mail when you go on vacation, things like that. We did not learn online safety habits. At least I didn't. No. Around my kitchen table. I learned them much, much later in life. And so people online today, whether it's, my contemporaries or my parents or what have you are doing the equivalent of walking down the street counting their money, right? Or leaving their front door unlocked.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there are people in crypto who also wear their ledger around their necklace. And that's just like the silliest thing in the world to me. And they get robbed.
Yep. Would not recommend that.
Of course you did, unfortunately.
Would not recommend
like
that
I don't
choice.
trust anyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Even with like luxury items in New York City, that's where I live, and people will get robbed in broad daylight for what they're wearing. And that's like a whole separate category. But yes,
that is
online scams is what we're focused on.
But so I think like
this podcast is sponsored by Galaxy. If you're immersed in the world of Web3, Galaxy is a name you need to know. As a decentralized super app with an impressive 21 million users boasting over 100 million monthly transactions, Galaxy is elevating its impact with Gravity, the magnet chain for Web3. Gravity is designed for full chain abstraction, zero knowledge proof based privacy, and rapid transaction speeds, all coming together to offer an unparalleled user experience. Gravity opens the door for developers to effortlessly build on the largest on-chain distribution platform, and for users, it promises an even smoother, more secure journey through Web3. It's not about being on-chain, it's about being on the right chain every single time. Galaxy is on a mission to onboard the world to Web3, and Gravity is the magnetic force that will propel the vision forward. Ready to launch your Web3 journey? Build the future on Gravity. Visit gravity.xyz for more information.
That people just need to learn a few more online security reflexes, right? To do the equivalent of locking their front door when they leave and not counting their money in public and not walking down the dark alley as the shortcut, right? But there's no one, or there's very limited resources out there teaching people about this stuff. And
Why do you think that is?
I think that it's hard to hit all the audiences effectively. This is something we've run into as we've thought about this, because we think about this a lot in terms of educational content. It's one of the reasons we did the video. We look at how do we reach the populations that need to hear this message? Because this is another thing I say a lot. Like the folks that are reading the Coinbase blog about scams and online security probably don't need to read about scams and online security in the Coinbase blog.
They already dealt with it and they're trying to
and this is exactly right? They probably already know about it, right? So how do we get there before the bad thing happens and reach those audiences that need to hear this message? And it can be really tough, right? To find the right venues and the right places and the right formats that really land with those people.
Maybe when people make like Coinbase accounts, you should make them watch a video.
That's so we've very, very seriously considered this. That might become a thing, right?
Well, there you go. Great minds think alike.
Absolutely.
What about internal things that happen at Coinbase? Like what are some scams? They haven't happened at Coinbase, but that you keep seeing like a rise where they're trying to test Coinbase. Does that make sense, what I'm asking? It
does. And we see like the bad guys are very, very innovative, right? They're just as innovative as good guys, right? And so we see them testing different types of scams or attacks or things all the time. Very, very common. And we do a lot of work to try to sort of get inside their decision loop, be able to detect that stuff as it's starting to happen, put countermeasures in place in our apps to make it harder. Either, this might be scams, this might be fraud, this might be whatever it is. But so we see that kind of stuff start to happen. And if we're good at what we're doing, it starts to happen. We see it, we think about it, we say, if we made this one little tweak to this workflow, it would make it much, much harder for them to do that. And so we'll make the tweak and it goes away, right? Because bad guys, just like good guys, right, want to be efficient. They don't want to work any harder than they have to.
Right. With the rise of AI and, a lot of impersonations, deepfakes, whatever category you want to look at there, how does that kind of affect the way you look at security? Yeah,
it's fascinating. And so there are a bunch of interesting risks here. So number one, we have seen deepfakes, not yet targeting us, but other companies used in what are called business email compromises, BECs, as we abbreviate them in the industry, where basically in this context, you'll get a Zoom call from your CFO, right? And what this used to be is like, very shady. Maybe you get a text message, hey, I need you to move money, whatever, things like that. Now it's like full live deep fake face reproduction, voice cloning, whole 9 yards.
I don't think my old bosses would ever send me a video of them saying like, Jackie, you need to go buy me a gift card. But
but
if it looks like them, I guess I'd be like, oh, maybe they're just having an off day and they're really demanding
or something. Or they'll even do this over video conferences now.
Oh God. Okay.
So it's like over Zoom or things like that. It's very, very much more effective than like the old school text message. I need you to buy me a gift card kind of thing. And that's a very real threat that's happening now much more than it ever was before. I think we also see, my general take on this is AI makes things faster, not better. But we see that used in scammers as they're doing this sort of initial outreach to victim populations, right? They can use chatbots instead of humans, things like that, to make this more efficient for them as they're pursuing whatever scam they're pursuing.
I also feel like it also is like cyclical in nature with the crypto market.
Absolutely.
I used to cover like these quarterly or annual scam hack reports, however you want to title it. And it would be like during a bear market, they would be down because they don't see as much opportunity. And then during a bull market, they would be back, which is like a lot of retail investors. And I guess scammers have that in common. But how do you kind of look at the state of hacks and scams today during, I would argue, what is pretty bullish market that we're in?
Well, I think if you were to create a scammer index of bull versus bear market, it would currently be pointing more towards bull than bear. Okay,
so the scammers have decided we are in a bull market.
Yep, because we see the same thing you do, right? That activity sort of increases and decreases with the health and state of the market overall, and we currently see folks, scammers, paying a lot of attention to crypto.
Yeah. Would you define like meme coins that are rug pulls a form of a scam?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a type of confidence scam, right? Where the person or people who are building the meme token and then intend on rug pulling it, are trying to build confidence and create investment before they run away with the money.
Yeah, I would argue the same, but I feel like some people just view it as like, oh, the dev got me, and I'm like, is it a dev? Or is it just someone that just?
I don't see it as any different than any other type of scam, right? The mechanics are obviously different, but mechanics of scams have changed. I say a lot, like I bet the first scam happened right after the first money was invented. Or perhaps after the first.
They're like, here's a dollar plus. It's not a dollar, but it's a dollar plus.
Right. Or it's like after the first time a chicken changed hands, for some beans or whatever, someone's like, I bet I could get extra chickens if I sell him like sawdust in my beans, rocks in my beans. Exactly. Right.
God. But do these people really get held responsible for it? I guess that's a philosophical question.
I mean, that is a philosophical question. And the answer is probably not that much. And I'm not talking crypto, I'm talking scams in general.
Yeah.
Right. Because number one, this goes back to a lot of this stuff is just never reported. Right. For reasons of shame, for reasons of, people not wanting publicity, for all sorts of reasons, this stuff goes unreported, which makes it very hard to hold bad actors accountable.
Yeah. What would you say are the most uncommon scams? We talked about some common ones.
Uncommon scams. That is the first time I've had that question.
One you haven't seen in a long time.
One I haven't seen in a long time. There used to be a lot more scams around like token authorizations, right? That we saw a lot. So like, a scammer tricking somebody into clicking accepts on what they thought was a simple SYN that was actually an authorization on a smart contract to withdraw or move money, things like that. I think the industry's gotten much better at transaction transparency and telling consumers exactly what's going on. And I'm sure there are similar scams that are going on now, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of the stuff is incredibly complicated and incredibly nuanced. And it's very hard to explain to my mom, right? Like, what is this transaction going to do when you click yes?
Yeah. And making sure you're doing it on like the right blockchain and the sender address is correct.
And now even on the right L2,
yeah,
not just the right blockchain.
Yeah. So simplifying these experiences should help.
I think user experience helps a lot, right? Really good security focused, consumer centric design on this stuff. And being very clear on who your personas are as you're designing it. Are you designing for a crypto expert? That's a very different look and feel than, my mom.
Yeah. You have been in the security space for a very long time. You were at Palantir before as the information security lead, right? And then you did counterintelligence for the US Army, which is very interesting. What lessons from those careers and experiences are you bringing to Coinbase?
Yeah. On the counterintelligence side, which is a fascinating topic in general, counterintelligence at its core is about people, right? And of course, it's a technical discipline like anything else. There's lots of complicated stuff underneath, but at the very core, in my opinion, counterintelligence is about people. And so is security. And that's not, I think, a commonly, held belief, or if it is, it's not commonly acted upon. But at the end of the day, people make choices that lead to security issues or lack of security issues. People might be developers, they might be consumers, they might be, staff in the accounting office sending wires, it might whoever it is. They make choices, and those choices are almost always rational, given the information that they currently have and whatever their frame of the world is. And so security is not about saying, hey, you idiot, you made a dumb choice. Security is about asking, why was that the right choice? And how can I make it the wrong choice for that person in their frame with their knowledge in the future, right? And that to me is a much more productive way to engage. Frankly, it's just nicer. But it's also much more productive way to engage with the human element of security. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I would say.
So how can people make the right choices in crypto?
What it comes down to first and foremost is education, is spending the time to say this isn't a push button game that folks are playing. There's real, knowledge and complexity underneath that hood that if you don't understand it, someone else might understand it better than you do, and use that knowledge for your loss, whether it's loss from an investment perspective or loss from a scam perspective, loss from an accident perspective, right? But there's very real, knowledge and to some extent skill that needs to be developed there if you're going to be, crypto native, buying and selling tokens, interacting with, complicated blockchains, things like that. I think the second thing there is, the vast majority of people probably don't need to be at that level, right? And so pick places and tools, not this isn't a commercial for Coinbase here, but pick tools that give you the information that you need to do what you need to do in the safest possible way. Whether that be self-custody, a ledger, Coinbase, whatever it is, great. That's less important to me than that consumer for their needs has the tool or platform that they are comfortable with, they understand, and they can interact with confidence.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, I feel like with a lot of the scams in the space, or at least for the companies that face hacks, exploits, whatever, it's always a matter of they just didn't check that, or they weren't actually auditing XYZ or whatever it may be. Why do you think security is such a back burner?
Well, I don't think that those two necessarily are the same thing.
Okay,
right?
Go ahead. Tell me.
Because I think security, this is an enormously complex field, right? And even people who are in this for a long time, are doing a good job, and are doing everything they can do, they're human. They make mistakes, right? They miss things. They forget about things like that. And I think that we see this with like very sophisticated organizations, right? Google had a huge famous hack back in the early 2000s, many others. And so this isn't a one-sided game, right? So back very early in my career, before I even was in the military, I was a software engineer.
Okay. Very cool.
And I really enjoy writing code. But security really grabbed me because I can do everything right. I can do this to the best of my ability. I can be having my best day. And there's another guy on the other side, or gal, or now machine, potentially, who might just be having a slightly better day than me. And they might win because of that. There's real competition. There's real skill involved, not just beyond just writing good code, things like that, right? And so it's much closer to a professional sports analogy, I think, right? A football game, right? Two teams, both of them at the absolute top of their game. That's only one of them gets to win, right? And it's frequently the one who makes fewer mistakes. Now, then you might ask, isn't that sort of a nihilistic view of security, right? We're all going to lose over a long enough period of time. I don't think it is. What I think of is a reminder and encouragement every single day that there are bad actors out there who are looking to take advantage of mistakes. And it's not about, we're never going to not make mistakes, but it's about making mistakes in ways that are recoverable, right? That are defendable. There's another quote that I like to think about a lot. I don't know if it's real or not, but it's attributed to Mike Tyson, right? Like, everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face.
I know that one.
And it's very, very true, right?
It is true.
And security is a game of getting punched in the face. So what happens by bad actors, right? So the question is not, what was your plan up until you got punched in the face? The question is, what's your plan now that you've been punched in the face? How do you respond? How do you react? How do you make sure that punch is not the end of the game, just the beginning of the game, right?
But Coinbase has not been hypothetically punched in the face. So are you constantly
I would argue we are constantly punched in the face. The problem, what we've never been is we've never lost a fight.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because that punch is the beginning, not the end. Right? Because we do defend in depth. We do train and we plan and we exercise. We have the staff that we need. You can't help but get punched in the face in crypto. Right? It's just coming. It's around every corner.
That's the $1 million quote there, yeah.
Right?
$1 billion quote.
It's around every corner.
It is.
The question is not, how have you avoided getting punched in the face? The question is, how do you avoid losing the fight?
I like that. To wrap things up, Philip, can you leave us with a piece of advice? Something that you've carried with you throughout your time in this industry.
Sure.
Could be security, could be anything else.
A good piece of advice. Lots of people can find problems. The people that matter solve problems. So solve problems.
Yep. Be a problem
solver. Be a problem solver.
I like that. Awesome. Philip, thank you for coming on today.
You're very welcome. It's great.